politics.
Well, the issues just won't go away from that particular elections. Joining us to look at the Anambra governorship elections this morning is Chukuma Ezela. He's a legal practitioner, also an international election observer, and he's also been monitoring elections in the country since 2003. Good morning, and thanks for joining us. You looked at this. Perhaps maybe we can take a cue from what you've seen outside the country, since you have also been privileged to be an international election monitor outside Nigeria. From this particular election, what can you say about us as a people?
I think we have not learned much. I have observed the elections, particularly in Ghana. And when you get there, you see the conduct of the electoral body. And you will also see a demonstrable confidence by the people on the electoral body. So I just want to use Africa as a centerpiece, and particularly West Africa. But what we see here is always a situation of not preparing for elections well. Management of elections in the system people are usually saddled with management where they do not have the competence. So when you don't plan, it means you have planned to fail. And that's exactly what we have seen in Anambra State today.
Okay, this election that's causing a lot of, raising a lot of dust. Prior to it, there was a Edo State election, and this same election umpire was commended for organizing a very credible election. And based on that, they came into this. And I mean, a few days to the election, you heard them talking about how prepared they are. So what do you think went wrong?
You see, even when we commended INEC on the management of Edo elections, that does not mean that they did very well. But you know, when the opposition wins, the noise will be higher. You know, but when the one that is not looked at as opposition wins, you know, the noise will be a bit higher. So I think it's a question of what were you able to do? Edo State was said to be fine. Now, Anambra State, in the case of Anambra State, you find out that the Electoral Commission, the lack of preparation, just like when you get there, you see names were pasted on the wall. People's names were not seen in the register. That is one. Second aspect, because the two areas we had problems are with, the issue of getting the names, and the second is the issue of starting elections late. And that these are areas we are saying there should be something to be done. But then we must be careful to observe that the elections both in Anambra and the elections we've had this year and in the last 2 years are still better than what we saw in 2003 and 2007. So to that extent, Anambra State is still a far much improvement of 2007 and 2003.
Can we really say that? I mean, because this is about the loudest complaints that we've heard in any election that INEC has conducted. But some people say that it's because we've chosen to ignore the irregularities, and maybe for some reason there are more heavyweights in this particular election than there has been in any other election.
No, I think, you know, what maybe we are looking at comparative analysis of Edo and maybe Ondo states. Now, but if you look at what happened in 2003 and 2007, there were no elections going by any standard. Now, in Anambra State, we did not necessarily hear much about, because I have put calls across to the observers, to some of the candidates, to people that are living around there. There weren't much cause of stuffing of ballot papers or falsification of results. But the major issues of complaint are, one, the election started late in many places. Take, for instance, Idemili local government, which is just about 10-15 minutes away from Oka, the state capital. And the elections will not start in some of the areas before 12. Including Oka itself, elections did not start in some areas till 10-11.
Tell us about the terrain, because you've lived in that state for about 14 years before you left. What do you know about the terrain?
The terrain of the area is about one of the best in the country, especially in terms of access roads. Yes, you have the areas that are at the bank of the water, you know, those areas to get into the interiors may be a bit challenging, like areas like Obaro, areas like Ayamelo, Anambra local government areas, and Oyi. Some of those areas may be difficult. But the hinterland, when you get to, but if you think of Idemili, Oka, Agolo, Aguata, Newi, Ihiala, all those areas are very clean and they are very clear. The two former, or the rather, Senator Ngige and Mr. Prt1, they've done a lot in terms of roads in that area. So connecting to the capital, like somebody said the other time, that you can crisscross Anambra State in 3 hours. And that is the true position of facts. So there is actually no reason why we should be saddled with this problem. The only areas you may have little problems now will remain Obaro, and then, like I said, some parts of Anambra local government, particularly Anambra East.
You know, in trying to solve or unravel some of these problems and see if we can actually get solutions to them or get answers to some of these questions, we're trying to see how the movement of materials are in places outside the country, especially, let's take the Ghana example, for instance. How were they able to move materials to election venue to the extent that, well, they got there in record time? If you say, well, the terrain is not that difficult except for some few places, how come that even in Oka, just the way we also experience in Edo State, that some places in Benin City didn't get election materials in good time?
I think the problem we have in the country is a question of credible people to conduct the elections.
Credible people?
Yes, to conduct the elections. That is for the management of the elections. Otherwise, why would you not move these materials closer to the place and give people around that area these result sheets? The result sheets, since, for instance, you have a result sheet where the party agents are going to sign, why are you hoarding it? But when you don't enthrone credible people to manage elections, you now start working out, releasing these sensitive materials on the day of the elections. And when you now work on releasing them on the day of the elections, there will be these problems of sorting out. And where in Nigeria we don't plan well, we don't have data. Just look at offices that we have. Our data are not properly kept, they are not properly managed. If, for instance, in Anambra State, you leave by 6 o'clock in the morning, you will get to any of the places within in the next 2 hours or 3 hours. So the materials, all of them would have gone. Maybe the result sheets can now come in later if we want to do it that way. In Ghana, there is measure of trust. There is trust to the extent that the sensitive materials will all be moved to the far places a day or 2 days before the time. And then some of them that they cannot move within that period, they have helicopters that they can use to move it. But more importantly is that they trust the electoral commissioners. They trust the presiding officers. And when we were, for instance, observing the elections in Ghana, you find out that when you interview people, they will tell you, oh, electoral commission, presiding officers, we trust them. So the parties will have confidence on the people conducting the elections. In Anambra State, look at what they said, that somebody sabotaged in a particular area. Why should we be talking about somebody sabotaging? The person can sabotage because he feels that nothing will happen to him at the end of the elections.
I'm very concerned that it's not a logistic problem for you. You put it down to, trust, which is something that cannot be measured, cannot be felt, cannot be seen even in a human being. And you're saying that it's now up to us to get credible people. What do you think informs the trust in Ghana?
And it is also a type of people they have and the type of government. Because what encourages credibility is also the ability of the government to prosecute people who would have, gone the other side of the law. So in Ghana, you find out that if an election manager, does something wrong, he will certainly be punished. He or she will certainly be punished. And that will instill a measure of fear in them. That is one. Again, because the government in power do not interfere in the election process, that's the type of result you get. Take, for instance, when we are talking about interference, I think, to be fair, from what we have heard, we have seen, President Jonathan seems to have distanced himself a little bit from the electoral body, more than what we have seen in Nigeria in recent time. But the governors, when you look, that's all concerning the management of elections. But the governors in all the states, none of them can say that he has distanced himself from the electoral body, either the state electoral body or even the INEC itself in their states, with the measure that President Jonathan would have given them as a, So that's what we are seeing. Is it Lagos? Is it Edo State? Is it anywhere? Where have you seen opposition winning local government? So we need to, for the first time, start thinking, do we want to respect the will of the people? Or do we want to continue in this way? And if we continue in this way, it means we are heading somewhere else.
Because if you look at the cry or the outcry even coming from some of the major candidates, and now they're all together saying that, look, this process was actually jeopardized by maybe the commission and some other individuals, it brings to mind what you've just talked about. I still want to stay on the issue of trust. Perhaps let's see how we can start having such, and you say it is, from what we get from the government, that is when people can start getting to see that there is some level of trust in the electoral umpire. I think that we saw that kind of trust in Jega when he came then, but with his electoral officers, for instance, the man who's been picked, even though he's saying that, look, I'm not alone, I did not work alone, it means that we have a whole lot of people who in INEC that haven't actually done their jobs correctly. So how do they get to fish these people out, or were they planted there deliberately to jeopardize any smooth process?
We can, one may not necessarily be able to, but do you know that Jega do not appoint the state the REC, Resident Electoral Commissioner? The Resident Electoral Commissioner is still appointed by the government. But if the government decided to say, let's appoint professors who they think will have credibility to conduct this, and these professors come in, they stay there, either by sheer incompetence or by compromise.
Which is possible.
Which is also possible, which we cannot rule out. Something goes wrong. The commission has powers to discipline. And you may be disciplined for either incompetence or negligence.
Does that discipline extend to the point of, say, terminating their appointment?
For the Resident Electoral Commissioner, the Electoral Commission cannot terminate his appointment. But remember that they can post them away from a particular state. That is one. They can also make recommendation to the president to send the person to the Senate for removal.
If